What up, y'all? This is Dominec369 for Occultism Unleashed. We are talking about Mercury Retrograde in Gemini through all 12 houses. If Mercury retrogrades through your first house right now, you are really reevaluating, because the retrograde gives you the opportunity to go back and check how you are assimilating the planetary energy of Mercury as it travels through your houses. So going through your first house, Mercury retrograde in the sign of Gemini is asking you to evaluate the things that you brought from your subconscious in your 12th house into your first house, and how you use them to express yourself in ways that impact how the world perceives you. Because the first house is the house of self. It isn't just the house of our physical being. It's the house that tells us how the world interprets how we project our soul's energy from our sun and moon sign. So with Mercury retrograde in the first house, it gives you the opportunity. Because retrograde is about opportunities, not about punishment, not about confusing you. It's an opportunity to reevaluate how you are using the planetary energy as it travels through your chart. So Mercury retrograde in the first house is the perfect opportunity to really evaluate and check how you communicate and convey your ideas and thoughts to the world. Mercury retrograde in your first house is the perfect opportunity to change your mentality so the world perceives you in a better way. Because Gemini in the first house gives you the power to communicate and understand and analyze. Use that power. If Mercury is retrograde in Gemini in your second house, you are reevaluating the things that are important to you, analyzing and studying, your thought processes, your mentality. When reassessing your values and your thoughts on your values and how you communicate your values to the world, it's an opportunity for you to learn to speak in ways that help people understand your purpose and your mission better. It's an opportunity to get your values out there to the world. So when Mercury goes retrograde in your second house, that's the universe telling you, hey, check out some different ways of, communicating your value and the things that are important to you to the world. Retrograde is time to reevaluate and improve upon our thinking and communication process, especially as we move to the third house, because the third house is the natural placement of Gemini. That is the house of communication. It is the house of our siblings. How do you communicate with your siblings? How do you communicate with the people who you grew up with? How do you apply your early education? These are all things ruled by the third house. That's why I tell you guys, get the rulership book. Whatever planet, whatever house Mercury is going through, look up the third house in the book, fourth house, etc. Look up the house in the book, and then see what things are ruled by the house. But as you go to the fourth house has to do with issues with your father. It has to do with karma connected to your family roots. How do you allow these things to weigh on your mind? What from your family structure in regards to communication and mentality, especially the toxic mentalities, do you need to let go of? You bring your values from the second house to your fourth house when you release that karma thought processes, especially the self-limiting beliefs that we get from our family. You know, take it as a magnificent blessing to have Mercury retrograde in your fourth house. Because you can get rid of a lot of toxic mentalities and self-limiting beliefs that were passed on to you through your father's presence or the absence of his presence, and family bullshit just passed on to y'all generationally. You know, excuse me. When you get to the fifth house, Mercury retrograding in the fifth house. The fifth house, it rules your creativity. It rules your investments. You know, superficially, it rules booty call relationships. Not long-term relationships, but just, you know, fleeing sexual relationships, recreational sex. You know, Mercury retrograde in that fifth house, it also rules your gambling. You know, so Mercury retrograde in Gemini in that in that house, that's what happens when you eat cotton candy for breakfast. You get gas. But you know, you got it retrograde in your fifth house. You're reevaluating, you know, how you spit your game. How you spit your game in your recreational romantic relationships. How you allow other people to finesse you mentally to get you out your drawers. Mercury retrograde in fifth house give you an opportunity to check all that, man. It also give you, you know, the opportunity to analyze and evaluate. And again, pay attention to the key words. Gemini rules information, analyzation, you know, thinking. You stick with the keywords of the planet, the sign, and the house, and it helps you easily understand and analyze a house. But the more you understand the correspondence, the deeper you can go. But the fifth house, it also gives you the opportunity to evaluate what you think about children, because the fifth house rules children, your relationship with children, your children if you're a parent, you know, or people that you play parent to. And sometimes that includes your parents. So Mercury retrograde in Gemini in the fifth house, you really may need to evaluate who you're allowing yourself to parent. If you are playing parent to people who you're in intimate relationships with, you really want to analyze and look into that and see if that's how you want to continue. And if that's how you want to continue to promote yourself, because the fifth house rules how you market and promote yourself. As you move to Mercury retrograde in the sixth house rules your health. It rules, you know, what services you provide to the world. It rules your pets. It rules your landlord. You know, people in the service professions, you know, police, you know, EMTs, military. It rules the union. It rules hospitals. You know, so when you got Mercury retrograde in the sixth house, it might be time to start communicating about your health. It may be a good time for you to really look into, you know, breathing exercises, stopping smoking, because Gemini rules the lungs. You know, you got Mercury retrograde in your sixth house. It's a good time to stop smoking, man. Good time to stop smoking. Good time to, you know, communicate what services that you can provide to the world or to your immediate environment. You know, evaluate the work that you do for others. Look for new houses. Sign new contracts with your landlord. You know, look to communicate with authorities about the police, about the military, you know, about the union. If you got any of these things going on in your life, Mercury retrograde is a good time for you to evaluate how you think about these organizations governed by the sixth house. Mercury retrograde in the seventh house in Gemini, you're looking at, you know, the seventh house, it rules your marriage partner, but more importantly, it rules the advice and advisors we have in our life, which includes lawyers, doctors, anybody who you get advice from. The seventh house is really the house of friends, because the 11th house is a social environment, and those people that you socialize with usually aren't your friends. They're just people you go do, you know, dumb shit with. Sometimes they're your friends too, but, you know, usually they're not. They're associates. And a lot of people don't know how to distinguish friends from associates. But back to the 7th house with Mercury retrograde in the 7th, these are the issues you need to address, especially reevaluating contracts, legal issues, any court issues you got going, marital or divorce issues, because the 7th house is the house of open enemies and war. So when Mercury is retrograde in the 7th, it's a good time to evaluate the things that are ruled by the 7th house and how you think of these things and how you express, how you feel about, how you express and communicate your ideas in regards to the 7th house and the things that it rules. As Mercury goes retrograde in your 8th house, it gives you an opportunity to heal your thought process. Heal and transmute your thought process. To rid yourself of self-limiting beliefs. The 8th house is the house of transformation because it is the house of death. Anyone who truly understands death knows that death is just part of the transmutive process. It's a transformation. The 8th house is the house of mediumship. It is also the house of surgery. It is the house of other people's resources. Mercury retrograde in the 8th house. It's a good time to evaluate, evaluate all your documents, especially things having to do with wills, taxes, Mercury retrograde in the 8th give you an opportunity to get all your business issues with debt because that's the house of debt, Get that done. Issues with loans. You don't want to take out loans or sign any contracts while Mercury is retrograde in Gemini. Now is the time to go back through old contracts and make sure you and other people dotted all the I's and crossed the T's, because Mercury retrograde in Gemini is a good time for you to get out of contracts. I promise you that, especially if it's in your 8th house or your 7th house, because the 7th rules litigation. In the 9th house, Mercury rules long distance travel. Long distance travel, higher education, but more importantly, my favorite thing about the 9th house is it's the house of faith and belief. Your house where you find all your wishes. So Mercury retrograde and Gemini in your 9th house is the best time for you to really analyze your belief system. Bring it from the mental plane, write it down to the physical plane. Mercury retrograde in the 9th house is where you make the magic happen. It gives you the opportunity to analyze your self-limiting beliefs and rid yourself of the thought processes that stop you from being the greatest version of yourself. Mercury retrograde in the 9th house. Go back and really take a look at what you believe, what you have faith in. Mercury retrograde going through the 10th house. The 10th house gives you, Mercury retrograde through the 10th house, it gives you the perfect opportunity to work on your communication with your mind. The 10th house rules your mother. It also rules your career, but more importantly, in your intimate relationships, it rules your mom. Your thoughts and ideas, your understanding that you have of your mother, how you want to be nurtured and mothered and how people mother is important when Mercury is retrograde in the 10th house. It's a good time to communicate and kick it with your mind about any issues that you have. And if you can't or don't want to kick it with your mom, it's a good opportunity for you to really evaluate the relationship that you have with your mother, especially if it's toxic. especially if it's laced with emotional manipulation. You know? Mercury retrograde in the 10th, because the 10th house rules your career. It's an opportunity to evaluate how you communicate on your job. It's a good idea to evaluate where you think you are supposed to be impacting the world, because the 10th house cusp is at the very top of the chart. It's the zenith, where you make your mark on the world, how high you will ascend in the world. The 10th house reveals that. So when Mercury is retrograde in the 10th house, it's most important for you to evaluate who you are and who you're meant to be. To really take note of that when you have Mercury retrograde in your 10th house. In the 11th house, you're checking out your, and analyzing your social environment, your social sphere. Also, the values that you get from the place that you are in the world. The 11th house, they say, is the house of hopes and wishes. Friends, hopes, and wishes. That's because our social environment, gives us things to aspire to be as rewards from our place in the world, which is governed by the 10th house. When Mercury is retrograde in the 11th house, it's important that you take note and really think about how much of yourself you lose in order to be a part of a social circle. Has it been worth it? Do you need to start reinvesting in yourself? These are things that you can really analyze if you have Mercury retrograde in your 12th house, because the 12th house is the house that we go to retreat from the world, to really process all of the information that the planet has gathered as it traveled through all other 11 houses and signs. The 12th house is where we break down and consume and digest this information. But we can't properly channel that energy of the 12th house if you don't take time to retreat from the world. That's why the 12th house rules hospitals, nursing homes, prisons, institutions. I had 3 planets in my 12th house, the Sun, Mercury, and Neptune when I was born. I spent a lot of time in prison. But in prison is where I really learned about myself. I broke down all of the life experiences and things that I've gained from the other houses and learned to release that which that didn't serve me. You have to be able to channel the energy of the houses. Understanding your natal chart. Understanding what energy the planets bring into the houses and take out of the houses, carry into other houses. It's important to understand how your computer works if you want to be successful in life. I'm going to drop another video and talk about, how Mercury retrograde affects the Gemini and Virgo on the house cusp. Thank you for you guys sitting through this. Peace.